Welcome to Press Play. I'm your host, Cedric Fisher. Press Play is a weekly broadcast from Black Video News Network. You can find us at blackvideonews.com or on YouTube. Black Video Network, all one word, no spaces. Welcome to the show this evening. Press Play is always a show that talks about issues that are going on in the African American community that impact our lives and our lifestyle, our quality of life. For the past 4 weeks, we've talked about COVID-19, all the responses to it. We've brought on subject matter experts, frontline workers, folks like that can really help us understand how to navigate through this pandemic. Right on the heels of that, another issue has changed the world and has gone global, and that's racial equality, racial injustice, and just about everyone now has somewhat shifted their attention from COVID-19 to this big issue. Who knew this was coming? And unfortunately, we had a series of lives that have been sacrificed or unjustly taken from us that has spawned a global uprising around the issue of race. Today we're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter. We're all familiar with them now. Who knew that some years ago this particular organization would have the global impact that it has? And I'll give you a little bit of information, some background on Black Lives Matter, just in case you haven't checked them out. So this is their 6th year, which is somewhat interesting because, again, a lot of us really heard about Black Lives Matter the very first time with the Trayvon Martin case. But they've been around before then, and they were founded in 2013 in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin. And it's a foundation, a global organization in the United States, UK, and Canada. Their website says their mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power to intervene in violence inflicted on Black communities by the state and vigilantes, by countering acts of violence, creating space for Black imagination and innovation, and centering Black joy. And that's their mission. Fortunately, through this particular situation, this has become the group that folks have focused on to help move this agenda forward. I think the good news about this issue going on right now is it has become of interest to just about every group and every nation on this side of heaven. So you find in a lot of the marches and protests, at least from my vantage point, that almost 2/3 of the marchers or protesters are non-Black. But they're raising signs and they're kneeling and they're doing all the activism things that African Americans have historically done. But they believe that what's been going on is it's time to make a change. And Black Lives Matter is the group that everybody is focused on. We're going to talk about that today, and we have brought on a subject matter expert who is going to enlighten us about his perspective on Black Lives Matter and, of course, the current racial situation. And I'd like to bring on the show Mr. Cleophus Marshall. He goes by Cleo. Mr. Marshall is an attorney as well as a pastor here in San Antonio, well known by the local community, and he likes to go by Cleo, so we'd like to welcome Cleo to the show. Welcome to the show, Cleo.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here, and hopefully we can say something that will help not only people of color, but really our entire nation and hopefully the world globally, so that we can bring some semblance to equality, justice, and fair treatment of all people, people of color, people of every race, and people of every social economic background as well. So we're hoping that we can say something here today, do something here today that will help advance the cause of humanity.
Before we get into the topic, share with our viewers a little bit about your background. Just sort of tell them who you are and the work you do.
I'm a native of San Antonio, Texas, born and raised here, attended public school here in San Antonio, Texas. I left to go to law school in North Carolina. I attended North Carolina Central University School of Law. I graduated from there in 1996. Came back to San Antonio and started initially with the district attorney's office here in San Antonio. I worked as a prosecutor for almost 9 years here in San Antonio, and then I went into private practice. As a practicing attorney, and specifically defense attorney, I've tried everything from capital murder to aggravated assaults to various types of theft crimes. If you name it, I've just about tried it. So I'm very familiar with the court system. My goal is to try to help people. As a prosecutor, I represented the cities of Bexar County. As a criminal defense attorney, I still represent the citizens of Bexar County, just one at a time. I'm also a local pastor. I've been in the ministry for well over 20 years, and I've had the pleasure of pastoring beautiful people of different backgrounds and different levels of human endeavor in this society, and it's just been a wonderful passion of mine. I'm married, I have 3 beautiful children, and I'm just thankful that God has given me an opportunity to be able to help some people as long as I'm here in this journey. As one rapper used to say, the marathon continues. Well, the journey continues for me, and hopefully it will continue to continue until we can see some real change.
Very good.
Very good.
Special individual. Great background. So let's talk about Black Lives Matter. From a legal perspective, kind of enlighten us on some of the work that they're doing. Obviously, they are not a group that has a legal background, or they're involved necessarily in the court cases and that sort of thing. But just what's your perspective on Black Lives Matter from a legal perspective?
Well, you know, any organization that has at its core the desire to help the least of these, those who have been disenfranchised, those who have been marginalized by society, in every facet of human endeavor, in every facet of society, whether in the workplace or in the legal system, in corporate America, whenever there are people who do not have a voice, and then there's an organization or entity that will stand up and give them a voice, then I am for that. Now, obviously, we want that entity or organization to be law-abiding to the extent that it can be, unless we're talking about civil unrest as it relates to not following unjust laws. But, you know, as far as Black Lives Matter is concerned, I think that we can see now what's going on in our community, in our society, in our nation, even our world, that it has definitely made an impact. I was a little disconcerted initially about the movement because I was concerned that they do not have any core or centralized leadership. And whenever you're talking about moving things in a legal way in this country, you need to have a representative. You need to have some central type of leadership. And so they have operated without that type of leadership. And I think that to some extent, it stalled their ability to be effective. But now with the death of George Floyd, the video that has become viral, people now are taking a second look at this organization, and many organizations for that matter that are standing for justice, and they're saying Black Lives Matter. I think that the name of the organization is what is so galvanizing to people. I hope to believe that as we continue to move forward, that the focus can be centralized to the point that we can see real change.
Okay. They've obviously galvanized the entire globe because, again, you got folks outside of America here who are embracing the cause, and Black Lives Matter is somewhat the group, again, that everybody's taking a look at. So how do you feel about the fact that there are certain people who just deny the organization's validity and really are not in support of what this cause is all about?
Well, you're never going to have 100% support from anyone or any group of people concerning anything. Sometimes you can't even have unanimous support in your own home,
True.
as it relates to different matters.
Sure.
So that's not of much concern to me, because I did not expect for there to be 100% agreement. However, I think that there are some who would work against what the organization represents, what the movement represents, because of ignorance, because of prejudice, because of systemic racism that we know exists. And so there are a number of different types of people that will work against an organization like Black Lives Matter. Some of them we can never win for our cause because they don't want to be won. But there are some people that really, just because of sincere ignorance, they just didn't know any better. They've been living their life not understanding what's been happening to the people of color. And now when they see a video like George Floyd and an officer with his knee on his neck for almost 9 minutes, to any person that is human, that has some moral compass and some desire to see justice and fairness and equality for all, that video has to be very, very troubling. And you have to begin to ask yourself questions like, how can that happen in America? Why is that happening to this particular person? And then when you begin to ask yourself those questions, and then you begin to hear that this is something that people of color have been addressing for decades, then you have to say to yourself, either I'm part of the problem or I'm part of the solution. So we hope to win people who truly have a heart for humanity and want to see people treated fairly, no matter what their race. And we welcome those people. We welcome those people. We welcome any person, black, yellow, white, red, green, pink, orange, it doesn't matter. We represent any person that's willing to stand with us and fight for equality.
Okay. And somewhat of a personal question. Have you participated in the marches recently?
Yes, I was just participated in the march the other day, and I will have to tell you that I'm a young man. I consider myself to be young and energetic, and I can still get out there and run with my children. But when I was participating in the march, these young people are very, very energetic, and they were really on the move. And I found myself having to try to keep up with them, especially as they were, they had the bullhorn, and they were shouting out chants and everything. And I had to just take a break and get some water and say, I had to catch up with them because, they're really, really passionate, but they have the energy. Yeah. And this is not something new. If you go even back to the civil rights movement, when people like Dr. Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy were marching, what really made that movement work was the young people. Because if you recall, it was the young people that went out there on the front lines and said, take us to jail. And many of them went to jail in what we call the paddy wagons and the buses and the vans. And they went to jail because they were young, they were excited, and they were passionate about the cause. The young people today have that same fire, they have that same passion, and it's not just people of color, it's people of all races. And truly, that's a beautiful thing. I'll say this, President Trump said he wanted to make America great again. Some people really think that means he just wants to make America hate again. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting how his actions that would lead to polarization of America is really galvanized young people to come together. So in a sense, maybe he is making America great again, but not in the way he imagined.
Okay. And if you followed him over the course of time with this, he's never ever mentioned that word or those 3 words, Black Lives Matter. That's another topic for another day. You used a key word earlier, which is movement. This is a movement, there's no doubt about it. Do you think that it's got a lot of longevity, that we'll see it for years to come, or once this issue, because this too shall pass, is clear, that the organization may not have the kind of, the movement may not have the kind of momentum that it has now?
Well, I would say that our world has changed Now, whether the country changes with it is another matter. And we're not talking really about COVID-19 and the pandemic. Our world changed simply because of that. But as it relates to the issues surrounding racial equality, systemic racism, the world has also changed. Everybody is talking about this being a protest. And, you know, people are talking about it should be a peaceful protest. And you just called it a movement. I think what we're really experiencing now is a revolution. A revolution is different from a movement, is different from a protest. If you think back to biblical days, many know the story of Jesus, how when he went into the temple, he saw that the money changers were dealing with the people in ways that was unequal, unfair, unjust, and he turned over the money tables. The tables were turned. To revolt means to turn over. Revolution means that things are turning over. When you think about what's happening in the country today, there is a turnover. We're talking about police brutality and now people wanting to hold police officers more accountable. You're talking about businesses now saying Black Lives Matter. We get it. We understand it. Legislation is changing. That is a revolt. That is a revolution. Interestingly enough, you can never find in the history of this world where a revolution has ever taken place and it has been peaceful. There's no such thing as a peaceful revolution, because whenever you turn the tables, you're going to make the powers that be upset, and they're not going to freely want you to turn the tables. When Jesus overturned the tables, they sought to crucify him, and indeed they did. We as Black Americans and those who are joining with us in this revolution are turning those tables over. What will be interesting to see in the months and years to come is whether or not we have the kind of pushback that Jesus faced and that any people face whenever they push for a revolution. That's the question that needs to be answered. But no doubt about it, things will change. And the young people will not accept even what we in our generation and the generation before us accepted. The movement of King went but so far, and then people became comfortable. They said, we can live, we can exist, we know things are not perfect, right, but we can make it. The young people are saying now, no, we're pushing this lever to a new dimension, and they will not be satisfied with where we are as a country right now. And I'll end this particular point with this statement. I think social media has a lot to do with that, because so many people of our generation, white people may not have had interactions with Black people. You can meet white people who will say, I don't really have a Black friend. I never went to school with a Black person. I've never lived in the same neighborhood with a Black person. I don't really see them but for on television, and you know how we are depicted on TV. But these younger Caucasian people are seeing their Black friends in social media every single day. They're interacting with them through Instagram, TikTok, Facebook every single day. Yeah. They're learning their music, they're learning their language, and they're saying, that's my friend. I get him. I get her. I understand them. I don't like the way you're treating my friends. So it's a different perspective.
Yeah, good assessment. And you're also right that the majority of the energy in this movement or revolution, as you just addressed, is in youth.
Yes.
In fact, everybody's been monitoring this from the very first day that the marches started, and I think we're on like day 13 now. I just really thought it might end after about day 5 or 6, but these folks have a lot of energy, a lot of passion, and they want to start seeing change. And I like the comment. What the marchers are saying is, no justice, no peace. But what they really mean is, don't look for peace until we see justice. They may stay on this until that happens. In your line of work, have you ever had to deal with police brutality in any of your cases?
Yes, I'll get with that. I just wanted to add one thing to something you just said. You have to also remember that we're in the midst of a pandemic and more people are at home. So if you really think about what happened, this is a perfect storm of a pandemic, systemic racism with and the video of George Floyd, and then having the president that we have who is so polarizing. When you bring all of the mix of those ingredients together and people are not going to work and not going to school, they're going to the streets. Something is happening, and all of this is not just of our doing. I still believe, as any preacher would, that God is in control and God is moving in the midst of all of this. As it relates to police brutality, I have not handled specifically any cases dealing with someone alleging police brutality. I have had cases where, either as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney, where my clients or my constituents have said that the police have been racist, and we hear that quite often, or they acted in a way where there were racial undertones. I never forget, as a prosecutor, I once had a young man as a defendant come in and through his attorney said that the police officer was racist. Well, as a prosecutor, you hear that a lot. So we just can't, look at every case involving a black person as the officer in that case being racist. But in this particular case, I went in to talk with the police officer because before it was a motion to suppress, and before we go forward with that in front of the judge, we want to talk with the officer to see what his position is regarding the case. So as I go in to talk with the officer, I reach out my hand to shake his hand, to say hello, to greet, and he doesn't shake my hand. He folds his arms. Thinking that he believed I was the defense attorney, I said, "No, I am the prosecutor. I'm handling the case, so I just wanted to discuss it with you before we had our motion to suppress." And he says, "I know who you are," and folded his arms and would not shake my hand. And I said, "Oh, I see what this is about."
Interesting.
And we had our motion to suppress, and suffice it to say, the court granted the defendant's motion to suppress, and his case was dismissed.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. We are going to take a break and come back with attorney Cleo Marshall. We're talking about Black Lives Matter. This is Press Play. I'm your host, Cedric Fisher. We'll be right back.
1, 6, or a dozen trees. No job is too big or too small. Booker's Tree Services is a certified arborist and state licensed company. On the ground or in the air, we are here to take care of all your tree needs, from stump grinding, tree pruning, tree trimming, tree removal, and much more. Call the professionals to help manage your commercial or residential needs. Don't let your trees make you nervous. Call for a free estimate today at Booker Tree Service, 210-657-8085.
One in 3 adults has prediabetes. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Because of you, I feel not alone in this world. And you let me know that it only takes one person to make you feel wanted.
One in 3 adults has prediabetes. That means it could be you, your favorite brother, your other brother, you, your football buddy, your football buddy, you, your plumber,
Breathe right into your foot.
your plumber's masseuse,
Yes.
you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Does your life matter? Education, health, and finance can determine your future and explain your past. Pick up the latest edition of Black Life Texas Magazine, a monthly outlook on life with an African American focus. Life is what you make it, so live it in the black.
Nothing to do this week? Don't miss another event. Go to blacksinsanantonio.com for our event calendar. The home of the largest business directory in San Antonio with an African American focus. Sign up today for our weekly e-blast and text message alerts. Help us make this a better community. Connect, empower, grow.
Welcome back to Press Play. I'm your host, Cedric Fisher. This evening we are talking about Black Lives Matter. And our special guest is attorney Cleo Marshall. Welcome back, Cleo.
Thank you again for having me.
So let's talk about the Trayvon Martin case. You had some thoughts about that, I remember, in the past. And what was your perspective on it?
My perspective of the Trayvon Martin case, that was a case a number of years ago out of Florida, as I recall, where a young man was visiting with his father, had gone to the local convenience store, picked up a bottle of tea and some Skittles, was walking back home, and an individual by the name of George Zimmerman, who appointed himself to be the neighborhood watch, I guess God, I'm gonna say God because that's the way he was acting that night. But he sees Trayvon Martin walking, and he calls the police and basically says that there's a black man with a hoodie on that is acting suspicious. And again, those are the code words. Oftentimes, black people are acting suspicious. But he confronted Trayvon Martin, and in that particular case, Trayvon Martin was on the telephone with his girlfriend, said that there is a gentleman who is watching him and looks like he's going to come his way or confront him. And the last thing that the girlfriend hears is Trayvon Martin say, "Get off me." Well, that case was tried, and in that case, George Zimmerman was found not guilty. There were a number of issues in that case. As a former prosecutor and now criminal defense attorney, I was really taken aback by. First and foremost is the way the prosecution handled that case, because they played, I should say, a video that George Foreman and his criminal defense lawyers had made, wherein George Foreman talked about how the incident took place.
George Zimmerman.
George Zimmerman,
yeah.
Yes. I said what?
Foreman.
Okay.
No problem.
I like him, George Foreman. I do like him. But George Zimmerman,
right.
They played a video, and in that video, George Zimmerman is saying how Trayvon Martin attacked him. Well, it was a self-promoting, self-serving video, and had the prosecution not played that video, George Zimmerman would have had to take the stand and claim self-defense. By playing that video, George Zimmerman did not have to take the stand. He was not subject to cross-examination. And so really all the jury had to consider was what the prosecution was alleging, and then that video that offered George Zimmerman self-defense. I think that, I would like to say that the prosecution dropped the ball, but in that particular case, I think the prosecution just handed the ball to the defense in that case, and George Zimmerman was found not guilty. So I have some real issues with that particular case.
So you saw that as a prosecution error, or just poor prosecuting?
I saw it as a prosecution error. I also saw it as an error with the theory of the case, because there was a point where, in that case, where the defense alleged that Trayvon Martin had attacked George Zimmerman and had gotten on top of George Zimmerman, and George Zimmerman said, "Get off me." But Trayvon Martin's mother said she knows the voice of her son, and that was Trayvon Martin saying, "Get off of me." The prosecution believed then that Trayvon Martin and Zimmerman were in this fight where Trayvon Martin was saying, "Get off of me," when in effect what happened, I believe, is that when George Zimmerman walked up on Trayvon initially, Trayvon said, "Get off of me," because George Zimmerman had invaded his personal space. So that's just language, it's, urban dicta that the young people would use whenever you invade their space. Get off of me. It doesn't actually mean that you are actually contacting me. It just means that that's the initial point where you've invaded my space. You are now too close. Get back. Get off of me. And I think something that simple, if it had been truly understood, maybe we would have a different outcome. But that again is where prosecution not understanding the vernacular of a whole section of the population could really affect the outcome in the case. And that's just something. That's not just something that deals with prosecution, but that also deals with juries, because when juries see black and brown people on the stand, it has oftentimes been my experience that they don't understand how they talk. They don't understand why they do certain things. So it's easy to put a black and brown person in a box that says you're a criminal, your behavior is criminal, when the behavior may not have been criminal at all.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the jury, because I was thinking would a change of venue had made a difference, because obviously they get a different makeup of the jury with a change of venue, and maybe that jury would have saw things differently.
A number of things could have been different in that case. I just think, though, and here's the problem that we have. If you don't change anything in that case except the race of the two individuals involved, that is to say, Trayvon Martin was black and George Zimmerman was white, having walked to the store, coming back to his parents' house. Same exact circumstances. I just do not believe that Trayvon Martin would have been set free. I believe he would have been found guilty, because the question would have been, why is this black man bothering this white man walking in his own community?
No doubt.
Maybe I'm wrong, but my experience in America,
okay,
I just think that everything could have been the exact same except change the race, and you're going to have a different outcome. And that's the tragedy of the American experience as it relates to people of color.
Okay. Now, local, let's just come local again here. There have been 3 kind of famous, infamous police brutality cases you're aware of. How do you feel about those 3 cases?
I don't know if I would call them police brutality cases. I have not studied them enough to be able to come to that conclusion.
Okay.
I think that there are definitely cases that need to be re-examined in light of where our country is at this time, because the needle has moved with respect to understanding the nature of how police can be aggressive with people of color. There are 3 cases, I think, that I believe you may be talking about. One dealing with Charles Roundtree, the other one with Marquise Jones, and then finally with Anthony Scott.
Those are the 3.
Those cases are from different years, different ages of the victims in the case, and different circumstances. In some circumstances, I can see where it is the families have real trouble with understanding how it is that it came that their loved one died at the hands of police. In others, you're probably dealing in some gray areas where it's not that clear. And so what our local district attorney, Joe Gonzalez, has said is that unless there is new evidence that is located in the case, he would not take the cases back before the grand jury, because he believes there are some ethical issues with him doing so. The families are definitely not happy about that, and it appears that they want to put pressure on the district attorney in light of where we are right now in our country, again, with the needle having been moved as it relates to how people view police.
Okay. Given your vocation and you're professional, look at the cases that are currently pending, because 3 I know haven't gone to trial quite yet. Arbery, Brianna, and obviously George Floyd. What's your take on how those will likely end up?
In the Aubrey case, that man was chased down the street and executed, basically. And now we have just learned that racial derogatory words were used either at the time or right after the time he was killed. And that's coming from one of the alleged perpetrators, having spoken to the police through his attorney to make that known. So I think that case is clear. If a jury does not come back and find the actors in that case guilty, then that will speak volumes with just how far that needle has moved that we just talked about. In the Brianna Taylor case, we have already seen legislation change in the city or the state where this has happened with her. And for those who don't know, Brianna Taylor was at home, a young lady at home with her boyfriend about 1 o'clock in the morning. The police were executing a no-knock warrant looking for an individual that they had taken a warrant out on. That individual, I believe, was already in custody, and so they were knocking on the wrong door. But they forcibly entered the home. Brianna's boyfriend got his gun, as any person in that situation would do, and fired upon the people who had kicked their way into the home. The officers returned fire, shooting Brianna Taylor multiple times, killing her. That murder of Brianna Taylor, alleged murder is what many would call it. Murder is a legal term. So that homicide, I should say, by the police department has led to legislation being changed wherein in that particular jurisdiction, no-knock warrants are no longer the law. And indeed, that is one of the pushes of organizations like the NAACP, Black Lives Matter, the Rainbow Coalition, to try and to get no-knock warrants to be illegal, to be made illegal in this country. Because when you're talking about a no-knock warrant, you can take an individual who's in plain clothes, maybe they have a badge, around their neck on the necklace or a chain, but an individual who's plain clothes in the middle or early morning hours, knocking down a person's door while they're asleep, probably startling that person and coming in to do a warrant, to execute a warrant. Just imagine, you're at home, you're in bed, sleep with your wife, maybe your children in another room, and all you hear is the door being forcibly kicked in, the alarm is going off in your home. In that rush of that moment, you probably can't even hear people saying they are the police. And indeed, even if they are saying they are the police, how do you know that's just not a regular person kicking in your door?
Were these officers in uniform?
My understanding is that they were not in uniform. Right. So they were not in uniform. They come in the house, and Brianna's boyfriend fired at them, and they returned fire, killing Brianna. And interestingly, the boyfriend was arrested and charged with the crime of firing upon the officers. He has since been let go, and that case against him has been dismissed. But even if you look at that case, something else happened in that case, because when they wrote the report in that case, they said that the entry was not forceful. And so it gets to another point where police officers so often change police reports. In the Aubrey case, that may have been somewhat of the case, even though police were not involved. There was a case of a black man, I want to say his name was Walter Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was stopped by police, got out and ran, and shot in the back multiple times. That police officer was tried and found guilty. But in that case, the police officer alleged that Mr. Scott tried to take his taser. When the police officer had dropped his taser, and then after he shot Walter Scott, walked up and put his taser next to Walter Scott. Had it not been for a bystander videotaping that, we would have never known that occurred, and the police officer's report would have been all we had. So when you look at the cases like Roundtree, Jones, or Scott here locally, I think the grievance of the family is this. We don't really know what happened, but for what the police officers said. We must take their version of the events as truth. And we know that police officers lie. In this current climate, now that people know that police officers will lie, if the district attorney were to present that evidence before a new grand jury, would the grand jury give the police the same benefit of doubt, or would they say there's enough probable cause for this to go to a jury and let the police have to fend for themselves before a jury of their peers? I think that's what the family is saying. And so Joe Gonzalez has not made the decision to do that. It is his right to do so. But I think the family would like to see that he take the initiative again to bring this case before a grand jury.
And there was no video footage of these. They haven't been captured on a cell phone or anything of that sort.
I don't think so, but if there is, I don't know the extent of it. Because remember, you're talking with 2014, 2016, 2017. Yeah. Video body cams were not as widely used as they are today. So there are a lot of things that took place prior to officers wearing body cams that you only had to take the officer's word. And then indeed, even with the body cams, the officers' reports don't always match with the body cams. So, you know, it's a lot for us to try to digest, but we can understand how this movement, revolution, Black Lives Matter came into being and why it is so important at this time right now. And I'm hoping that as we continue to move forward, it will accomplish what we have not seen thus far in our lifetime, but the equality of all persons, starting with Black people, because their lives matter.
No question. I think it's a unanimous opinion about George Floyd's homicide that there's no way that these officers could walk. But from your experience, is that possible?
Oh, it's very possible. I mean, if I was defending them, I'd tell you exactly where I would start.
How would you start?
I would start with, okay, you don't see everything. I don't know his entire medical condition. All I know is that he is fighting with us. And he is falling down to the ground on the side of the road. He continued to fight. We did handcuff him, but he continued to fight in a manner that you could not see. Then as we are trying to make sure that we have him under control, by this time we're having interference from people in the public, and they have taken our attention away. And so when they're saying to us, you're killing him or that he's dying, we're having to focus our attention on them, and we can't look down to see what's going on with him. And so these things don't happen in a vacuum. These are very moving parts, and it's unfortunate that he died, but that was not our intention. Now, that's going to be difficult when you have your knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Right. Okay. Interesting perspective.
Yes.
No doubt about it. Anything you'd like to share? We got a few minutes left here with our viewers. You'd like to just leave a lasting comment, or can we help you in any way?
Yeah, I thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my thoughts concerning what is going on in our world right now. A lot of people have been calling me. I've had judges call me. I've had prosecutors call me and ask me what I thought, how I felt. I've had colleagues, I've had friends, I've been invited to speak on different shows. And so this has really been a great opportunity to just share how this event has affected me and what my view is. As a criminal defense attorney, like I said, I help people every single day. I represent people of all colors, all backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds as well. And for anybody if you need a lawyer, just call 210-444-CLEO and I'll help you. That's 210-444-2536, and we'll represent you to the best of our ability.
Attorney Cleophus Marshall has been our guest for tonight on Press Play. We thank you for joining us. Meet us back here again next Friday evening, 5 o'clock. Press Play, you can find us on YouTube at Black Video Network, all one word, no spaces. We'll see you next time.